which is there's one of the major problems is that Israel hasn't been held accountable for its violations of international law at all. We went to the International Court of Justice. We got a great ruling before the International Court of Justice saying that the wall is illegal, that Israel has to dismantle the wall and its associated regime, but it has done nothing on it. Not only has Israel done nothing, the international community has also done nothing. It's now time that Israel be held accountable for its actions. And the only way that I think that Israel is going to be held accountable is if people like you begin to speak up and do something about it. That's why I'm very pleased there are a lot of people here from Jewish Voices for Peace. It's very important. But I also think that there's things that we, as global citizens, can and should be doing. The first is boycotting. We should be boycotting Israeli goods. Unfortunately, Israelis don't get the message that the Israeli government, is not getting the message that what it's doing is in violation of international law. It knows it is. The world's telling it it is. But yet, at the same time, it seems to, every year, get billions of dollars from this government alone, leave aside my country, but from this government alone. Israel should be held accountable. Boycotting is one of the means of holding Israel accountable. The second is divesting. When I was in university at a time when South African apartheid was in full swing, which shows you how old I am. And one of the measures that my university enacted was to try to get the university to divest from its holdings that were South African companies. This is something that I think as a movement is very important for it to be done. And the third, it's a golden wish, but I know it won't happen anytime soon, but it's that of sanctions. Holding Israel accountable via sanctions is really the only way that Israel's going to get the message that what it's doing is illegal. It's these three tools, boycotts, divestment, sanctions, that are really forming the forefront of stopping this process of confining Palestinians into small spaces and taking their land. Apart from that, handshakes, photo ops, and all of those other great things that we see and we hear, and the great words that we hear from all of these various leaders are actually going to lead to nothing. So I'm going to stop there and open up to questions if you have any. Thank you.
I don't think I need to remind you all that our events this week are followed by an atmosphere of respect, and I think it's absurd that I have to say this, but please respect our speaker with the questions and don't take too much time giving your stance, but be straightforward with your question. And I'm here for your help. Start with you.
Hi, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first is about the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, you asked in the beginning of a rhetorical question. I mean, it doesn't make a rhetorical question. It doesn't make sense that Israel is enlarging the settlements when officially it's undergoing negotiations, right? So, it does make sense because the sense is that they're not moving from the settlements. So that they do not have in mind to try to pull out the people from the settlements. It's pretty clear. Ariel Sharon has always had the fait accompli as a point in his agenda. They want to have a fait accompli, and people will not have the possibility to pull out 450,000 settlers. So, given that these settlers are all in all the interstices of the territories controlled by the Palestinian Authority, what kind of state is going to, let's assume that a state will come out of this. What kind of state is it going to be? The form of control, given that the settlements will be there, control by Israel will always be necessary. Will always be necessary. There will always be the IDF in the West Bank. So what kind of state is it ever going to come out of this, even if they actually end up with a sort of agreement? And the second question is a little bit more technical. What is it going to happen to the Valley of the Jordan, the military bases, and the natural resources, natural reserves?
Okay. So what's the stake on the play? Look, there's three ways I would say it. Swiss cheese. That's what it looks like, a state that looks like Swiss cheese. Or it'll look like a little statelet. I think the best way to describe it is, it's very interesting if you compare a map of South Africa with the Buttu, and if you compare a map of the various Israeli proposals and how the West Bank is going to look, it actually looks very remarkably similar. So the idea is that the Israelis don't view Palestinians as equals. They're either a security threat or a demographic threat. That's it. There's no concept of me being an equal. So because of that, the only way that they can conceive of dealing with the demographic threat, or what they can consider to be a security threat, is to confine them into very small spaces. And that's what ends up happening in terms of, if you look at the final result, is that you will see exactly a situation in which Palestinians are living in these very small little islands, with perhaps a road or two connecting them. But that's it. And it's very remarkably similar to that of Brandeis. It's not going to be a state that's free. Now, even in the best negotiations, which were in 2001, there was never an idea of giving up control over the lives of Palestinians. So, for example, what do I mean by that? Which I forgot to mention during the talk about Gaza. The Gaza example is the best case. Is not the best. It's a projection of what's going to happen in the West Bank. And why that is because the Gaza Strip, the sea is controlled by the Israelis. The airspace is controlled by Israel. The border crossings are controlled by Israel. So anything that you need in terms of permission to get in or out, airport, seaport, all of that is controlled by Israel. There's no other outlet. And so too in terms of the West Bank during the negotiations that were taking place, and I'm telling you, those negotiations were better than the ones today. It was the same idea in terms of the West Bank. There was never an idea of Israel relinquishing control over the airspace. There was never an idea of Israel relinquishing control over even the electromagnetic spectrum. There was never an idea of Israel relinquishing control over the Jordan Valley. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was that they wanted to, one of the proposals, which was at Camp David, was that they wanted to control the Jordan Valley and then have a leaseback arrangement for, at one point it was 99 acres that they were talking about. So those elements of control have never been on the cards, of relinquishing control have never been on the table. And that's why I mean by saying that the peace process is not going to lead to that. Because even in the best case scenario of negotiations, there was never an idea of having anything other than a series of little islands that are perhaps connected via roads, but through which the Israeli army still remains in place and Israeli control still remains in place.
And what about the Valley of the Jordan?
Same. The Jordan Valley, there's always been an idea of perpetual control of the Jordan Valley in one shape or another.
Yes, they're in the back. And please introduce yourself so that we make more.
Hi, my name is Guy from Brandeis, and I would like to pose a hypothetical to you. Assume that you're the legal advisor to the head of the government in Gaza. And he wakes up one morning and says, you know what, Diana, I want to declare independence. How will you talk him out of that?
Well, okay, I can give you the legal answer, I can give you the practical answer. I'll give you the practical answer. Practically, he's not independent. He doesn't have control over his territorial waters. He doesn't have control over his natural resources. He doesn't have control over the borders. He doesn't have the ability to do anything other than keep a confined population. That's it. Even something as basic as issuing birth certificates, it's not done in Gaza. Issuing passports, it's not done in Gaza. All of these little things, and even to get an ID, it's unlike in the United States, every person who is born in the country, whether you're Israeli or Palestinian, has to get an ID number. Those ID numbers are not issued by the Palestinian Authority, they're issued by Israeli authorities, even for Palestinians in Gaza. So you can see all of the basic elements of control, of freedom, rest with the Israelis. They don't rest with the Palestinian government, whether that government's in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip.
And what's your legal?
The legal argument is a little bit more complicated, but it follows the same idea. Law is supposed to be logical, it's not always. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Gallagher. I'm a sophomore here, and I have 2 questions. Okay, so my first question is, I remember reading today that the World Bank just declared that the West Bank, under the wonderful work that Prime Minister Salam Fayyad has been doing in terms of state building, that says that the West Bank is prepared for statehood within the next year. So my question is then, why do you think President Abbas feels it's necessary to go back to a type of Arabization instead of Palestinianization from the 1980s by listening to the Arab League's opinion regarding negotiations? And my second question is, also reading within the current negotiations that the current negotiator is Saeb Erekat, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay. And he says that Israel alone should be held responsible for the failure of the peace talks, mostly regarding to the settlements, from what you just talked about. And given that the conflict has been going on for 60 years, and given that it's a conflict that both sides have been done wrong and been wronged, then why is blaming one side for the failures of peace, whether it's him, whether it's yourself, or anyone involved in the negotiations, how do you expect peace to come to fruition, and how do you expect any comments like that to be productive?
Okay, good. So on your first question, it's a little bit loaded, so I'm going to try to unpackage it a little bit. What you indicated, that it's the intro that's loaded, which is you said that the World Bank has said that Salam Fayyad is doing a great job and that Palestinians are almost ready for statehood, and the economy is improving, and so on and so forth. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Palestinian economy and a little bit about institutions, and then I'll talk about the what do you call it, Arabization of the conflict. So in terms of the economy, the Palestinian economy isn't actually a natural economy. As you saw from the checkpoints that are in place in the map, and if you read the report a little bit carefully, you'll see that what the World Bank is talking about, what everybody's talking about, the World Bank, the IMF, everybody else, is saying that economic growth in the West Bank is actually not possible with the settlements. It's impossible. And that there has been growth in the West Bank. It's not necessarily attributed to Salam Fayyad or any of his policies, but the reason that there's been growth is because the donor countries have given a lot of money into the West Bank. So it's not a natural economy. It's not to say that we haven't yet moved from being a labor-intensive economy to a capital-intensive economy. And that is because of the fact that there are so many checkpoints in place. Investors don't want to invest. The only growth that has happened over the course of the past few years, let's say 3 years, has been largely because the donors have infused more and more and more capital. That's not sustainable. I mean, because in the end it ends up being money that gets burned because it's used, but then that's it. It's not money that's used to then further more money that creates industry that builds more and more economic development and economic growth. So it's actually kind of a misnomer for them to say that the West Bank economy has improved. It's actually incorrect.